The Anglo-Norman period, 1100, 1500, Part-03, Chaucer, 1340, 1400. It was, in fact, Chaucer who was the real founder of English poetry, and he is rightly called the father of English poetry. Unlike the poetry of his predecessors and contemporaries, which is read by few except professed scholars, Chaucer's poetry has been read and enjoyed continuously from his own day to this, and the greatest of his successors, from Spenser and Milton to Tennyson and William Morris, have joined in praising it. Fresh beginning in English literature. Chaucer, in fact, made a fresh beginning in English literature. He disregarded altogether the Old English tradition. His education as a poet was twofold. Part of it came from French and Italian literatures, but part of it came from life. He was not a mere bookman, nor was he in the least a visionary like Shakespeare and Milton. He was, on the contrary, a man of the world and of affairs. The Canterbury Tales. The most famous and characteristic work of Chaucer is the Canterbury Tales, which is a collection of stories related by the pilgrims on their way to the shrine of Thomas Becket at Canterbury. These pilgrims represent different sections of contemporary English society, and in the description of the most prominent of these people in the prologue, Chaucer's powers are shown at their very highest. The Canterbury Tales is a landmark in the history of English poetry because here Chaucer enriched the English language and meter. Chaucer's works fall into three periods. The first period. During the first period, he imitated French models, particularly the famous and very long poem Le Roman de la Rose, of which he made a translation, Romaunt of the Rose. This poem, which gives an intimate introduction to the medieval French romances and allegories of courtly love. Chaucer's poetry grows. During this period, he also wrote the Book of the Duchess, an elegy, which in its form and nature is like the Romaunt of the Rose. Complaint unto Pity, a shorter poem, and ABC, a series of stanzas religious in tone, in which each opens with a letter of the alphabet in order. The second period. The poems of the second period, 1373-84, show the influence of Italian literature, especially of Dante's Divine Comedy and Boccaccio's poems. In this period, he wrote the Parliament of Fools, which contains very dramatic and satiric dialogues between the assembled birds, Troilus and Cressida, which narrates the story of the Trojan prince Troilus and his love for a damsel, Chryside. The story of Griselda, in which is given a pitiful picture of womanhood, and The House of Fame, which is a masterpiece of comic fantasy, with a graver undertone of fantasy, with contemplation of human folly. The third period. Chaucer's third period, 1384-90, may be called the English period, because in it he threw off foreign influences and showed native originality. In the Legend of Good Woman, he employed for the first time the heroic couplet. It was during this period that he wrote the Canterbury Tales, his greatest poetic achievement, which places us in the heart of London. Here we find his gentle, kindly humor, which is Chaucer's greatest quality at its very best. The development of English literature. Chaucer's importance in the development of English literature is very great because he removed poetry from the region of metaphysics and theology and made it hold as 'twere the mirror up to nature. He thus brought back the old classical principle of the direct imitation of nature. Chaucer's successors. After Chaucer, there was a decline in English poetry for about 100 years. The years from 1400 to the Renaissance were a period bereft of literature. There were only a few minor poets, the imitators and successors of Chaucer, who are called the English and Scottish Chaucerians who wrote during this period. Chaucer's successors were Occleve, Lydgate, Hawes, Skelton, Henryson, Dunbar, and Douglas. They all did little but copy him, and they represent an era of mediocrity in English literature that continues up to the time of the Renaissance. Thank you.